Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the dimly lit auditorium, with its ancient lights casting eerie shadows, a palpable tension hung in the air like an invisible curtain about to drop. The drama club's huddled group on stage reflected a spectrum of emotions, with panic and desperation reigning supreme as Professor Emily White's frantic strides back and forth mirrored their collective anxiety. Time was running out, the showcase a mere 3 days away, and their lead actress, Sarah, had unexpectedly been struck with a severe case of laryngitis. A lanky figure, almost camouflaged in the shadows, became the focal point of their despair. Ethan, in his signature navy hoodie and well-worn jeans, a surge of anxiety shot through him as he realized he had nowhere to hide. Desperate times called for desperate measures. A brave soul from the group proposed an understudy. However, Professor White swiftly dashed their hopes. Rebecca was Vanessa's understudy, and she's visiting her grandmother in Florida until next week. We need someone who can learn the routine quickly. A silence fell over the group until Marnie, a petite redhead with too much enthusiasm and not enough filter, snapped her fingers and pointed directly at the figure trying to blend into the shadows.
What about Luis? He knows all the choreography. He's been helping Vanessa practice for weeks.
All heads turned toward him. Luis felt his face burn as he took an instinctive step backward. "I'm just the lighting guy," he protested, voice cracking. "I only know the moves because I've seen them so many times from the booth." Professor Hamilton studied him with sudden interest. "But you do know them?" "Well, yes, but—" "And you know the song?" Luis swallowed hard. "Diamonds are a girl's best friend? I mean, I've heard it 1,000,000 times during rehearsal, but—" "Perfect!" Professor Hamilton clapped her hands together. "You'll step in for Vanessa." "What? No!" Luis's voice echoed through the auditorium. "I can't perform as Marilyn Monroe. I'm a guy." Professor Hamilton waved away his concerns. "It's a college talent showcase, not Broadway. The audience wants entertainment. Besides, men have been playing women's roles since Shakespeare's time." "But the costume," Luis stammered, thinking of the red sequined gown he'd seen Vanessa rehearsing in.
"It won't even fit me."
Marnie jumped in again. "My cousin works in the costume department. She can make adjustments overnight." Luis looked desperately around the circle for support, but found only hopeful faces staring back at him. Even his roommate Damon, who'd joined the club to handle sound design, gave him an encouraging nod. "Just until showcase night," Professor Hamilton urged. "Then you can go back to the lighting booth and forget it ever happened." Those words would come back to haunt him later. The next afternoon, Luis stood rigid in the dressing room as Marnie's cousin, Shannon, knelt at his feet, pins clamped between her lips as she adjusted the hem of the red sequined gown. "Stop fidgeting," she mumbled around the pins. "I'm almost done." Luis stared at his reflection in the mirror. The dress actually fit remarkably well after Shannon's adjustments, hugging his slim waist and creating the illusion of curves where there weren't any. The problem was the top. His flat chest looked absurd in the sweetheart neckline. "We'll need to pad that," Shannon said, following his gaze. She rummaged in her bag and pulled out what looked like flesh-colored gel inserts.
"These should do the trick." "This is ridiculous,"
Luis muttered, but allowed her to help him place the prosthetics appropriately. The transformation continued with makeup, foundation, concealer, rouge, and a bold red lipstick that matched the dress. When Shannon produced a platinum blonde wig styled in loose curls, Luis almost backed out completely. "I can't do this," he said, watching as Shannon adjusted the wig on his head. "I look..." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. He didn't look ridiculous, as he'd expected, with the wig framing his face, softening his jaw, and highlighting his naturally long eyelashes. He looked pretty. The realization startled him. "You look great," Shannon assured him, stepping back to admire her work. "Now let's practice walking in those heels before rehearsal." The red stilettos were a nightmare at first. Luis wobbled and clung to furniture, certain he would break an ankle before the showcase. But after an hour of practice, he found a rhythm, a way of balancing and moving that felt almost natural. When he walked into rehearsal that evening, the entire drama club fell silent. Then Marnie squealed and started clapping, and everyone joined in.
"Well,"
Professor Hamilton said, circling him with an appraising eye, "I think Vanessa might have some competition when she returns." Luis laughed nervously, teetering slightly in the heels. "Let's not get carried away. I just want to get through this without humiliating myself." But as rehearsal progressed, something unexpected happened. The more he practiced moving in the dress, lip-syncing to Marilyn's iconic song, the more comfortable he felt. By the end of the night, he was adding his own flourishes to the choreography. A coy smile here, a flirtatious wink there. "That was amazing," Damon said afterward, helping Luis gather his regular clothes. "You're actually good at this." Luis shrugged, trying to ignore the strange reluctance he felt about taking off the wig and dress. "It's just acting," he said, but the words felt hollow, even to his own ears. The night of the showcase arrived with a flutter of nerves that settled like butterflies in Luis's stomach. He paced backstage in the red gown and heels, now comfortable enough to move gracefully despite his anxiety. "You're on in 5, the stage manager called. Luis took a deep breath and checked his reflection one last time. The brown-eyed blonde staring back at him looked confident, glamorous, everything Luis had never felt as himself. "Break a leg," Damon said, giving him a thumbs up from the sound booth. The lights dimmed, the music started, and Luis stepped onto the stage. The spotlight hit him, warming his skin through the sequins as he began to move. The first notes left his lips. He'd decided to actually sing rather than lip-sync, and something magical happened. The audience disappeared. His nervousness evaporated. There was only the music, the lights, and the character he'd become. When the final note faded and he struck his pose, one arm extended dramatically, hip cocked. The silence lasted only a heartbeat before the auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Luis blinked against the spotlight, momentarily disoriented by the roar of approval. He took his bow, smiling broadly, heart pounding with adrenaline and something else, something he couldn't quite name, but that felt dangerously like belonging. Backstage, the drama club surrounded him with praise and excitement. "That was incredible! You killed it! I've never heard the audience react like that." Professor Hamilton squeezed his shoulder. "Looks like we found a hidden talent," she said, with a knowing smile. "You should consider performing more often." Luis laughed it off, but as he changed back into his jeans and hoodie later that night, he felt a strange sense of loss. He carefully hung up the red dress, smoothing his hand over the sequins one last time before heading home. He'd assumed that would be the end of it. One emergency performance, one night of unexpected success, and then back to normal life. But 3 days later, he found himself standing outside a vintage clothing store downtown, staring at a black pencil skirt in the window display. Before he could talk himself out of it, he went inside and bought the skirt, along with a cream-colored blouse with a bow at the neck. The sales associate raised an eyebrow when he claimed they were for his girlfriend, but rang up the purchase without comment. That night, alone in his apartment while Damon was out with his girlfriend, Luis tried on his new purchases. The skirt hugged his hips perfectly, and the blouse draped elegantly across his shoulders. He stood before the mirror for a long time, studying this new version of himself. Without makeup or a wig, he looked like exactly what he was, a man in women's clothes. But rather than feeling ridiculous, he felt right. Something about the fabric against his skin, the way the clothes changed how he carried himself, spoke to a part of him he'd never acknowledged. He needed to explore this feeling further. Over the next few weeks, Luis's collection grew. A pair of black pumps with modest heels, a brunette wig that matched his natural hair color, styled in soft waves, makeup purchased piece by piece from different drugstores to avoid suspicion. Each new item felt like another puzzle piece falling into place. He practiced in secret, learning to apply makeup with tutorials on his laptop, perfecting his walk, practicing a softer speaking voice. The character he'd played on stage was evolving into something more authentic, more personal. When he looked in the mirror now, he saw someone else emerging. Not Luis in a dress, but someone new. Someone who deserved her own name. Josie. The name came to him one night as he was practicing applying eyeliner. It felt right. Familiar yet fresh, like a name he'd always known but never used. Josie, he whispered to his reflection, testing how it felt on his lips. The person in the mirror smiled back, brown eyes sparkling with recognition. But Josie remained a secret, confined to the privacy of Luis's bedroom. Until the night Damon came home early from a date and opened the door without knocking. Luis, dressed in the black pencil skirt, cream blouse, and brunette wig, froze like a deer in headlights. Damon stood in the doorway, his mouth falling open in shock.
I can explain,
Luis said quickly, his voice still pitched in Josie's higher register. Damon held up his hands.
No need, man. Sorry for barging in.
He hesitated, then added,
You look good, actually. Way more convincing than I would have expected.
Luis felt a blush creep up his neck.
It's not what you think. And what do I think?
Damon asked, his expression surprisingly free of judgment.
I don't know. That I'm weird. That there's something wrong with me.
Damon shook his head.
After seeing you perform at the showcase, nothing weird about finding something you're good at.
He leaned against the doorframe.
So, is this, going to be a regular thing?
Luis hesitated, then decided on honesty. I think it might be. When I'm dressed like this, I feel more like myself than I ever have before. Is that crazy?
Nah,
Damon said with a shrug.
Life's too short to deny yourself something that makes you happy.
He paused.
So, do I still call you Luis, or...
A warm feeling spread through Luis's chest at his roommate's easy acceptance.
When I'm dressed like this, I've been thinking of myself as Josie.
Damon nodded.
Nice to meet you, Josie.
I was about to order pizza. Want some? And just like that, Josie took her first steps out of the bedroom and into the world, even if that world was just the living room of their shared apartment. With Damon's support, Josie's confidence grew. She practiced more openly at home, refining her appearance and mannerisms. But the real breakthrough came a month later when Damon, who moonlighted as a DJ at a local club, made a suggestion.
"The Velvet Room is having an open mic night next Friday," he said over breakfast. "I think Josie should make her public debut."
Luis nearly choked on his coffee.
Are you insane? I can't go out in public like that.
Why not? You've already performed on stage as a woman, and the Velvet Room is super inclusive. No one will bat an eye.
That was different,
Luis protested.
That was a character, a costume for a show.
Damon gave him a knowing look.
Is it really that different now?
The question lingered in Luis's mind for days. Was Josie just a character? Or was she becoming something more, a genuine expression of a self he'd always kept hidden? By Friday, curiosity and the desire to perform again won out over fear. Luis carefully packed a bag with his outfit. He'd splurged on a new blue satin evening gown and matching elbow-length gloves, and headed to the Velvet Room early to prepare. The club's backstage area was small but private. Luis transformed himself methodically, foundation to even his skin tone, contouring to soften his jaw, mascara to accentuate his eyes. The brunette wig, now styled in an elegant updo, completed the physical transformation. As he slipped into the blue gown, he felt Josie emerge fully, confident, poised, and eager to perform.
"You're on in 10,
the stage manager said, poking her head in. She gave Josie an appreciative once-over.
Love the dress. What's your name for the intro?
Josie, she replied without hesitation.
Just Josie.
When the MC called her name, Josie stepped onto the small stage with her heart hammering against her ribs. The club was dimly lit, but she could make out Damon at his DJ booth, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. She'd chosen At Last by Etta James, a song that required soul and confidence, qualities she was still discovering in herself. As the first notes played, Josie closed her eyes and let the music wash over her. When she began to sing, her voice emerged rich and clear, filling the space with emotion. The audience, initially chatting quietly among themselves, gradually fell silent. By the chorus, all eyes were on her, captivated by the performance. When the song ended, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic.
That was incredible,
a woman said as Josie stepped down from the stage.
Are you a professional?
Josie blushed beneath her makeup.
No, this is actually my first real performance.
Well, you should do this more often, the woman insisted. You've got something special. More people approached with compliments, and by the end of the night, the club manager had offered her a regular Saturday night spot.
The crowd loved you,
he said, handing her his card.
We pay our regular performers, of course. Think about it and let me know.
Josie floated home that night, the blue satin of her gown rustling with each step. She'd expected to feel relief once the performance was over, to be eager to return to being Luis. Instead, she felt a profound reluctance to remove the wig and makeup, to pack away the gown and gloves. For the first time, she allowed herself to acknowledge a truth that had been building for weeks. Josie wasn't a character or a costume. Josie was who she was meant to be all along. The regular gig at the Velvet Room turned into a springboard. Over the next 6 months, Josie's reputation as a performer grew. She expanded her wardrobe, investing in quality pieces that suited her developing style, elegant dresses in jewel tones, classic separates for daytime, and, of course, more evening gowns for performances. Her signature remained the blue satin gown with matching gloves, now accessorized with a vintage sapphire pendant she'd found at an estate sale. When she wore it, audiences knew they were in for something special. As Josie's star rose, Louise receded. She spent more and more time as Josie, eventually performing 3 nights a week at different venues across the city. The only place she still existed as Louise was at her day job at a bookstore and occasionally at home, though even there, she often remained Josie. Damon, ever supportive, had become her unofficial manager, helping book gigs and sometimes even doing her makeup when she was running late. He never questioned her evolution, treating Josie as a person in her own right, rather than his roommate in a dress. "You know," he said one evening, as they shared takeout after a particularly successful show, "I haven't seen Louise in almost 2 weeks." Josie paused, chopsticks halfway to her mouth. "I hadn't realized it had been that long." "Does that mean something to you?" Damon asked carefully. She set down her food, considering the question. "I think it means I'm finally living as my authentic self. Louise was a mask I wore for too long." She looked up at Damon. "Is that weird to hear?" "Not at all," he assured her. "I've watched you these past months. Josie isn't a character you play. She's who you are. Louise was the performance." Tears pricked at Josie's eyes. "Thank you for seeing that. For seeing me." The conversation marked a turning point. Josie began to consider what it would mean to live as herself full-time. She consulted with a therapist specializing in gender identity, who helped her navigate her feelings and options. The process wasn't simple. Telling her family was particularly daunting. Her parents, traditional and religious, struggled to understand at first. But seeing Josie perform, witnessing her confidence and joy on stage, helped them recognize that this wasn't a phase or a costume, but their child finally being whole. Her father, after watching her bring a room to its feet with a soulful rendition of Natural Woman, hugged her tightly and whispered, "I've never seen you so alive." Transitioning at work presented different challenges. The bookstore where she worked had a progressive owner, but Josie still worried about customer reactions. She needn't have concerned herself. Most regular customers simply complimented her new look, and those who recognized her from performances sometimes asked for autographs. By the 1-year anniversary of her first performance as just Josie at the Velvet Room, she had fully embraced her identity. Her brown hair had grown out past her shoulders, making wigs unnecessary. Her wardrobe had evolved to reflect her personal style, elegant but practical for day, glamorous for performances. Her legal name change was in process, and she'd begun hormone therapy under medical supervision. The journey hadn't been without obstacles. There were still people who didn't understand, venues that wouldn't book her once they learned her story, family members who struggled with pronouns. But for each closed door, another opened, often leading to opportunities she couldn't have imagined. On the anniversary night, Josie prepared for a special performance at the Velvet Room. The club had been renovated and expanded over the past year, partly due to the crowds her performances consistently drew. Tonight was sold out, with people lined up around the block. In the larger dressing room, dedicated to her now, with her name on the door, Josie smoothed her hands over the blue satin gown, recently tailored to better fit her changing figure, and adjusted her sapphire pendant. Her brown hair, now naturally long and styled in loose waves, framed a face that had softened from both hormone therapy and expert makeup techniques she'd mastered. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts.
5 minutes, Josie, the stage manager called.
Thank you,
she replied, taking a deep breath. Another knock followed immediately. Can I come in? Damon's voice. Of course. He entered, holding a small jewelry box. I thought you might want this for tonight. He opened the box to reveal a delicate bracelet with a single charm, a tiny microphone.
Damon, it's beautiful,
she said, extending her wrist so he could fasten it. I'm so proud of you, he said, squeezing her hand. Not just for your success, but for having the courage to become who you really are. Josie blinked back tears, careful not to ruin her makeup.
I couldn't have done it without you.
Sure you could have,
he said with a grin.
But I'm glad I got to be part of the journey.
He checked his watch.
Showtime. Break a leg.
As he left, Josie took one final look in the mirror. The person who stared back wasn't Louise in a dress, or even Josie the performer. It was simply her, authentic, complete, at peace with herself. The MC's voice boomed through the speakers.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the Velvet Room, the enchanting, the incomparable, Josie.
She walked onto the stage to thunderous applause, the blue satin gown catching the light as she moved. The spotlight found her, warming her skin as she approached the microphone.
Thank you all for coming tonight,
she said, her voice clear and confident. 1 year ago, I stood on this stage for the first time, terrified and uncertain. Tonight, I stand before you as my true self, grateful for every step of this journey. The music began. This Is Me, from The Greatest Showman, a song about claiming one's identity against all odds. As Josie sang, she felt the lyrics in her soul, each word a testament to her path. The audience rose to their feet before she'd even finished, their applause washing over her like a wave. Josie took her bow, smiling through happy tears as rose petals rained down from above. Damon's surprise, she'd later learn. In that moment, bathed in light and surrounded by music, Josie knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not just as a performer, but as herself, finally, completely, gloriously herself. Later that night, as she signed autographs in the lobby, a young person approached, hesitantly. Your performance changed my life, they said quietly. Seeing you so confident, so true to yourself. It gave me hope that I could be the same. Josie took their hand. The greatest performance you'll ever give is being authentically yourself, she said. Everything else is just costume and makeup. As she walked home that night, the blue satin of her gown rustling with each step and the moonlight catching on her sapphire pendant, Josie reflected on the unexpected journey that had begun with a reluctant step into someone else's red sequined dress. That night had been the beginning of her awakening, but tonight, a year later, felt like her true debut. Not as Louise playing a role, or even as Josie the performer, but as herself. A woman who had found the courage to emerge from behind a lifetime of masks and step into the spotlight as her authentic self. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for her voice or her performance. It was for her truth, her journey, her willingness to become who she was always meant to be. And that, Josie realized as she unlocked the door to her apartment, now decorated to reflect her personality with vintage posters and delicate furnishings. was the most powerful performance of all.
Thanks for watching, my girlies. Be sure to check out Patreon for more.